Today, I'll be going through a selection of 20 jazz and classical titles, some highlights of things I've found over the latter half of 2024. First off is a 1960 mono pressing of Miles Davis's Sketches of Spain. This is a T pressing from Indiana and was a gift from my brother. This is one title that eluded me in my Miles collection. This is an original 6-eye with a deep groove label, with the wonderful Concerto de Aranjuez from Rodrigo, Will o' the Wisp from Defia, and the classic B-side orchestrated by Gil Evans. This arrived in rough shape, but after a thorough cleaning it really sparkles and shines. Miles' timbre is pronounced and dynamic, with the orchestration and arrangements being nothing short of spectacular. Next is one from the Pablo series from Analogue Productions. This is Duke Ellington with Ray Brown, this one's for Blanton. This is truly a duet between piano and double bass. Over the years I'd searched for the original Analogue Productions double 45 of this, but it was always just out of reach. This was originally recorded in December of 1973 in Las Vegas, with the lacquer being cut at RTI and the vinyl being pressed at Quality Record Pressings in Salina. This title features mainly compositions from Ellington. The dynamic range between the low, rounded bass tones and the higher sparkling piano are truly magical. This is an incredible reissue series, and if you're unfamiliar with this music, I recommend getting acquainted with it. Les Paul and his trio. This is a 1957 mono recording from Tops Records. This was found in the used bins at Common Wave Hi-Fi in downtown Los Angeles. With a very low price due to a few scuffs, it did clean up nice. I'm a huge fan of Les Paul's guitar playing and this era of guitar music in general. This era of music captures something special in the recording quality, perhaps just the directness and the technical limitations which they were working with. Not an everyday listen, but definitely some special music here. Next, another reissue from the Analogue Productions label. This is the 200-gram remastered reissue of Satchmo Plays King Oliver. Recorded in the fall of 1959 in Hollywood, California at Radio Recorder Studio. This is absolutely incredible music, a beautiful recording with a really interesting repertoire. The opening track, St. James Infirmary, is a dark, moody classic. Analogue Productions also released a 45 RPM single EP highlighting this track, but for the full scope of this music, I highly recommend the 33 RPM LP. Next, a Classic Records reissue. This is the 1997 issue of Laughin' to Keep From Cryin', Lester Young, with Roy Eldridge and Harry Sweets Edison. Originally pressed on Verve Records in 1958. This is a stereo remaster cut from the original tapes by Bernie Grunman. 5 tracks of beautiful standard jazz music, including a nice version of They Can't Take That Away From Me. I randomly stumbled across this album while looking for something else for Lester. I didn't even know it existed. Found a very good clean copy for a reasonable price on Discogs. Next is Showcase. This is Philly Joe Jones from 1960, Riverside Records. This is an original stereo pressing. I found this at Blind Dog in their new location in Costa Mesa in Orange County, California. I had seen a copy of this in a friend's collection years ago and clocked it, but I'd never seen one in the wild and honestly forgot about it. This is explosive music, obviously rhythm-centric. Philly Joe Jones playing is magnificent. If you're a fan of jazz drumming, I highly recommend seeking out a copy of this one. Next is Barney Kessel, Kessel Plays Standards Volume 2. This is the 1956 mono original pressing from Contemporary Records. I found this in Tokyo at Disc Union Ochanamizu, but I forgot to include it in the video of the vinyl I found in Japan. As a guitarist myself, I'm usually enamored with jazz guitar, since that's a style of playing I never have learned. Kessel's guitar tone here is direct, but yet still floats and shimmers amid the arrangement. There is something to be said here about the direct punchiness of these early mono recordings. I don't have a dedicated mono cartridge in my system, but I do have a mono switch in my amp, so I am able to understand most of the intent here. Next is one of the coup de grace from live jazz recordings of our time. This is Waltz for Debby, the UHQR pressing from the Bill Evans Trio by Analogue Productions, double 45 RPM Clarity vinyl, limited edition, numbered, and housed in this elaborate slipcase box. I have many versions of this pressing, including the original 33 RPM from Analogue Productions from the 90s, the new OJC 33 RPM cut, and the double 45 cut from the Riverside box. But as a huge Bill Evans Trio fan and a massive Scott LaFaro fan, I had to pick this one up as well. This version was remastered by Kevin Gray and limited to 5,000 copies. It includes an 8-page booklet with liner notes by Bob Blumenthal. If you're even a casual Bill Evans fan, this is a must-have, the definitive version of this music by a long shot. In my opinion, this is a stalwart desert island disc, so I can rationalize the high price tag. This, along with the Sunday at the Village Vanguard, have to be some of the most clear and compelling live jazz trio recordings of all time. It's not hyperbole to say that it truly feels like you're in the room with them. You feel the texture of Paul Motion's brushes on the snare. You almost feel the reverberation of Scott LaFaro's bass pizzicato, and Bill Evans' piano is reverberant in the room, truly the gold standard of pressing quality and clarity in playback. The packaging and elaborate box is a bit overkill in my opinion, but the music shines gloriously, and this is the best this album's ever sounded. Moving out of jazz into classical, this is Berlioz, with Munch conducting the Boston Symphony Orchestra in Symphonie Fantastique. This is a 4 LP, 45 RPM, single-sided, limited edition, remastered reissue on 200-gram black vinyl. The first jacket that you see here is full art, with the other 3 discs in generic white sleeves. I have a few other versions of this music, and this is the first one with Munch with the Boston Symphony. Some of my favorite classical music, especially the March to the Scaffold and the Dream of a Witch's Sabbath. I picked this up from my friend Erin in Chicago, who inherited a large classical audiophile collection. She's slowly been selling off pieces of the collection over the years, and I was so happy to find this one still available. My copy arrived immaculate and looked unplayed. The vinyl was glossy black, with crisp corners on the jackets. I'm slowly assembling a nice little collection of the 45 RPM single-sided releases. This version is a bit hard to track down these days. As an alternative, I might suggest the 33 1/3 RPM Speaker's Corner reissue. Next, another elusive title from Classic Records. This is a reissue from the year 2000, so a quarter century old already. This is Jascha Heifetz with Walter Hindel, and William Prinrose with Isler Solomon, the Glazounov Violin Concerto with the Mozart Symphonie Concertante in E-flat for violin and viola. One side of music comprises each side of the record. With Heifetz being one of the violin masters of all time, of course the playing is miraculous, but the recording is also incredible, directed by John Pfeiffer with engineers John Norman and Leslie Chase. As with all classic record reissues, this was reissued from the original Analogue tapes in Los Angeles by Bernie Grunman. I might also note that this is one of the RCA living stereos that was not repressed in the Analogue Production series. As far as I know, Classic was the only one that did an audiophile reissue of this title. Next, from September of 1958, this is the original stereo version from London Records of Chopin and the Paris Conservatoire Orchestra, conducted by Maag. This is Les Sylphides, I think I said that right, backed with La Source by Delibes. This is my first original blueback recording in my collection. I found this while visiting my mom in Texas at a small record shop. Though the jacket had seen better days, the vinyl was extremely clean, and for a price tag of $10, I couldn't pass it up. This is beautiful ballet music, a title I hadn't really seen much talked about on YouTube. But the repertoire was played beautifully, and the recording was captured perfectly. Spending time and sitting with this music in a couple of active music listening sessions, I can truly now understand the allure of the London bluebacks. I'll be keeping a more keen eye out in the future for these pressings. Next is some of my favorite music for the winter season. This is the Requiem from Berlioz. Again, Munch here with the Boston Symphony Orchestra. This is an original 1960 mono Indianapolis pressing in the Soraya slipcase with a leatherette doweled spine. Absolutely incredible. This style of packaging was mimicked, as you may know, for the Analogue Productions UHQR series. This is the first edition of this album, limited to 200 copies. It comes with a 23-page booklet with tipped-in photos and gold foil embossing. I found this for a very low price at Counterpoint Books and Records in my neighborhood in Los Angeles and couldn't pass it up. I do have another version of this album that was a later repress, but this original from 1960 is now my go-to. One of my favorite choices for a dark winter morning listening session. Next is Yvonne Lefébure, playing selections from Ravel. This is from the Coup d'Archet label, a high-end audiophile label I was unfamiliar with. They mainly do reissues of remastered violin music, some of which featuring the soloist Johanna Marzi are extremely pricey. I found this at Blind Dog in the new arrivals used bin and couldn't pass it up. This was remastered at Abbey Road and pressed at Palace in Germany, with the original recording taking place in the summer of 1959. The next selection was found on Discogs through one of my favorite sellers, a brick-and-mortar shop in Indianapolis called Luna Music. Sometime earlier in 2024, Luna bought a massive audiophile collection, and I've slowly been picking off pieces throughout the year. Here is a reissue from 1993 from the King Super Analogue disc from Japan. Neville Marriner conducting the Academy of St. Martin in the Fields. This is the Tchaikovsky and Dvorak Serenade for Strings. This is my first King Analogue Super disc, and I have to say I'm really impressed with the clarity and fidelity here. The violin cuts through but isn't sharp or angular. There's a softness and a fullness in this recording and pressing. Recorded originally in April 1968 at Kingsway Hall in London. I do have another version of this music that was released on Cisco, but now in my mind this is the definitive version for me. Now we come to an original Mercury Living Presence title from 1962. This is the Nocturnes for Orchestra from Debussy and the Daphnis and Chloe from Ravel, conducted by Perret with the Detroit Symphony. Other than the London and the RCA Living Stereo series, the Mercury Living Presence titles have to be among the best ever recorded. And for this album, which the recording took place in a high school auditorium in Detroit, produced and directed by Wilma Cozart, with engineer Robert Fine. The highlight for me of this album is the closing piece of the Nocturnes for Orchestra, Sirens. A haunting swirl of voices resonate through this piece. Truly remarkable music. More Ravel here. This is a 4 LP box set reissue from EMI. This is Ravel's complete orchestral works, featuring Daphne and Chloe, Rhapsody Espagnole, the Mother Goose Suite, and La Tombeau de Couperin, conducted here by André Cloytens with the Paris Conservatoire Orchestra. This is considered an audiophile reissue and is actually pretty tough to track down, with the original version coming out in 1963. I think this repress is from the 2010s, though an official date isn't recognized on Discogs. This particular copy I was lucky to find through my friend Nathan in Rochester, who's an avid record collector. While I do own a few other variations of this music and other pressings, there is something nice about having it contained in a single box set. Moving on to Swan Lake from Tchaikovsky, one of my favorite pieces of music for ballet. This is a 2023 Esoteric Records pressing out of Japan, limited edition, stereo, conducted by Anatole Fistulari. This was recorded by Gordon Perry and Kenneth Wilkinson in the original 1961 version for London Records. Here from Esoteric in its high-end audiophile treatment. I found this copy at Common Wave Hi-Fi in Los Angeles, California, and this is the first Esoteric recording in my collection. Though I believe there is a digital step, the pressing is immaculate, a sonic spectacular to say the least. I have a couple other all-analog versions of this music, but I was very curious to hear what all the fuss was about with Esoteric. From Testament, this is a 2012 mono reissue, featuring soloist Johanna Marzi playing the violin concertos from Mozart and Mendelssohn. Originally recorded in June 1954 in Kingsway Hall in London. Marzi's playing is spectacular. Most of the audiophile reissues featuring her playing sell out immediately and then see an extreme skyrocket in their resale value. This is one title of hers that's still readily available for a decent price. Her playing is serene and otherworldly. It truly feels like a different universe she's coming from. There's nothing too spectacular about this pressing in itself, but the music is incredible. Her subtle and tasteful approach to her playing the violin is truly uncanny. This is highly recommended music for any fans of the violin. Next is a very elusive title. This is the ORG 45 RPM double vinyl pressing of Mendelssohn's A Midsummer Night's Dream, with the London Symphony Orchestra conducted by Peter Maag. Having had this same recording in the past on a 33 RPM single disc pressing, I can say spreading this music out over 2 discs at 45 RPM is truly astonishing. Overall, the sonic imaging on the 45 RPM cut here is just so enhanced. There's more space around the instruments, with a deeper and wider stage for the music to live within. I have to say this must be the definitive version of this music, though as I mentioned is quite elusive. This is from 2010 and it's taken me nearly 4 years to find a good copy for a reasonable price. Despite the campy cover, this is a true gem in my classical shelf. And now down to the final selection for this video. This is Fauré's Requiem, a 1982 His Master's Voice reissue. This was again found at Counterpoint in Los Angeles, a beautiful used record and bookstore. A lot of the titles they have in their used section are from the KUSC Classical FM library, as you can see here with the sticker on front. This is an incredible piece of music, but this pressing is just okay. I also found this same music at the same shop, a 1960 reissue from London, here with Ernest Ansermet conducting. Again, I'm not really sure why, but the Requiem music really speaks to me in the winter months. Something about the dark, melancholic mood really seems fitting. It's so fun exploring and researching and looking for this music in the wild. Thanks for being curious, and I hope something piqued your interest here as well. And we'll see you on the next one.